Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And welcome to another Monday Mini, where we're going to talk about sad things because that's what we do sometimes. And unfortunately, the reality is there's a lot happening and we can't shy away from it no matter how much we want to. So go ahead and put this as your content warning. We are talking about abortion and what is happening around this country as the ban has taken place and many of the states have gone to a total ban / heartbeat ban or the 6-week to 15-week ban. So yeah, if you're not ready for this, if you don't want to deal with this right now, that's fine. But just remember, we can't ignore it because it is happening and we are having to deal with it. So yeah, all those things. And there is a lot happening. As midterms are swirling, abortion has continued to be a hot topic of conversation, as it should be. And as expected, a Republican senator took it a step further from the original, oh yeah, we want it to be a state decision. This is not about anything else but state rights stance they were preaching to let's make it federal because, of course, it wasn't about state rights, as we have found out on most immoral political grandstanding when it comes to human rights. Yes, recently, Senator Graham, with public support from the president of the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America and other anti-abortion leaders, stood up to announce his bill that would ban abortion after 15 weeks across the nation. That was real commentary. Sounded like I was a broadcaster. Across the nation. Naming the bill, quote, Protecting Pain-Capable Unborn Children from Late-Term Abortion Act, of course, which is misleading in many ways, including the use of late term, which, by the way, is not an actual term. It's not a doctor or medical term, just in case you're wondering. And it's usually noted that fetal viability is not considered to around 24 weeks, just to put that in your head.
Right. And though he was originally quoted as saying, if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, it means that every state will decide if abortion is legal and on what terms. That, in my view, is the most constitutionally sound way of dealing with this issue and the way the United States handled the issue until 1973. Which, has quickly changed in a few short months and has now come back around to him saying that the new translation of the overturning of Roe v. Wade includes officials on every level to make the decision and standing firm that he hasn't changed his view. So,
yeah, all of a sudden the states was like, no, but that includes federal, which is like,
right.
That's not how that... Okay, dude. Of course, many have used this as either a fighting tactic or something to shame as politicians on both sides continue to weaponize the anti-choice conversation to get more money or more airtime. And please understand, yes, this is a big issue that we should talk about, but having officials send us requests for money instead of telling us what they're going to do to change is irritating, to say the least. Interestingly enough, we have also seen many conservatives shy away or outright turn their backs on the abortion issues altogether. There have been several who have said, we don't necessarily agree with Mr. Graham, Senator Graham, on his stance. Even Mitch McConnell saying that he doesn't believe this will be ever a thing, so he doesn't even want to deal with it. So a lot of things are happening. Even those in Texas and Pennsylvania have backed away from the topic, even though Texas is pretty big for we know why, and Pennsylvania is a pretty big swing state. So there's a lot of conversations happening.
Right, which we've talked about a lot in some past episodes. But the effect has already caused many issues around the country, and many women have shared stories of having to drive across state lines to access safe care in order to abort non-viable fetuses, and many who have had to return home to wait to hear back on whether they are approved, while oftentimes endangering the pregnant person due to dangerous infections, and even potentially leading to death. Marlene Estelles, a woman from Texas, shared her heartbreaking story of a miscarriage that was prolonged due to Texas and its stringent abortion ban. Another woman was noted to being hospitalized due to sepsis after having a miscarriage, but not permitted to have the fetus removed due to the heartbeat bill.
Right. And as in fact, that report, when they were talking about these two women, the woman who was sent home and actually came back hospitalized because she apparently had kidney failure as well, they told her straight out that you have to be closer to death before we can do anything about it, because technically there was still a heartbeat, even though the fetus was no longer thriving.
Ugh. Many other incidents around the country have been shared, not only publicly, but to the actual lawmakers and congresspeople who have slowly come to understand the detriment of these types of bans. According to Fox News, of all networks, their own research, they have found that at least 57% of listeners did not support the abortion ban, and that was a 13-point jump from the original percentage.
Right. That's pretty shocking. Even though we have had higher numbers in the state of Georgia on talking about the approval of abortion rights, for Fox News to do their own polling and to have these results says a lot. There are so many across the nation who continue to talk about this. And as we talked about previously, a lot of people are changing their stances. A lot of conservatives are actually looking at this issue as something that they would base their votes on, as previously they would just ignore it. So this is a whole bigger conversation. Of course, there's still conservatives who lean in and say it is about the life of the child, and I will bank my whole political career on it. The radical left is making this a big issue, and we want to see them put their money where their mouth is, because this is about abortion on demand, which is a whole new term that I haven't heard used too often. Now it's coming back around. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've been on the wrong side of the conversation here. Maybe I've been on the other side of the conversation here too long. But calling it abortion on demand, obviously, the whole idea of autonomy is what we're talking about. And if that's needed, then that is what it is. I think we also need to remember, once again, this is the conversation we're having, that when it comes to abortion bans, that it does endanger so many people, and so many of those who can't access anything. Okay, so according to another report, a woman from Alabama, and she's not the only one because there's been several reports, was recently arrested for marijuana. And when it was reported that she was 6 weeks pregnant, which, by the way, she apparently had just recently found out on the day of the arrest, she was placed in jail without bond or bail, and she was rejected by a drug facility after being assessed because she was not in need of that type of treatment. Again, marijuana is not enough for treatment, just in case you are wondering. And she was still locked up for the next 3 months as a way of caring for the fetus. And so this is to protect her. All the while, she was not getting care in the treatment while she was in jail. She was having to share beds with other women to the point that she slept on a floor just to be able to sleep. And she was not given access to any kind of neonatal special care. From what I understand, I think she got the regular care, which she went to the doctor if she got sick.
And there are others who have talked about the unsanitary and inhuman treatment of pregnant people or those who have given birth. One woman recounted that she was arrested after getting her prescription filled.
Right. So essentially she had a prescription that had been filled by a doctor. She waited a little bit, went and got it. And because those medications could endanger the fetus, they arrested her and kept her in jail. Again, the levels that we see that is happening, and we're not just going to bank it and say we've heard a lot of extreme things coming out of both Alabama and Texas, but we know this is everywhere. This is everywhere. And this is just the beginning of what we're seeing. And just because it didn't happen in another place doesn't mean it couldn't. And that's something that we have to be reminded of, as well as the fact that apparently there was a woman who had given birth, had tested positive for opioids, and was arrested right after giving birth and was not given any type of treatment, was not allowed any kind of pads or sanitary napkins because she was bleeding, by the way, while she was in jail, and she was not allowed to have them, even though her partner tried to bring it to her. They were denied. So there's so many things that this conversation has to be taking place, because this is not about life anymore, as we can see. Because who are they truly protecting, right? There have been many who are trying to predict the possibility of things to come in order to kind of give a warning and prepare people. And the article includes research from the World Health Organizations as well as scholastic researchers through universities around the country. So here are some things that they listed off as possible things to be affected. Less access, which is kind of like, yes, duh. Because we've seen many clinics that have been closed down. As of recently, I've seen many clinics that I have followed personally on social media who are literally saying, thank you so much for your support. We're so sad to have to do this. And here's access for anywhere else. That includes, of course, that this is making women or making those pregnant having to travel across state lines, which costs a lot of money. Recently, another story out of Alabama was a woman who had to travel to New York because she had a miscarriage and she was afraid that she wasn't going to get access to healthcare to get the unviable fetus out, of course. And then there's, of course, the increase of wait time, which has always been kind of a ploy. If you've heard our episode about crisis pregnancy centers, that is actually a tactic they would use by elongating the time and wait time and telling you, oh, no, you can't now. And oh, it's too late, so sorry. But actually happening because all of the neighboring states that do have clinics or accessibility are so packed out with appointments that they cannot get to everyone, which is a whole different level. And then there's, of course, the financial strain. We've talked about it many times, and we'll keep talking about it, but we know that abortion bans don't affect those who are higher on the income scale, and this will only make the divide greater to who has accessibility and who doesn't. We also talked about the fact that those who can afford and do have health care and do have to have a medical reason to have an abortion, oftentimes still can't afford it because it ends up being hundreds of thousands of dollars because of these types of languages about abortion. Yes, again, we've talked about D&Es and D&Cs and why these are abortion that people are still apparently fighting about, which I'm confused by, but maybe that's just me. And then, of course, this makes for more unsafe conditions. Bans don't stop abortion, but often stops safe abortion. We've talked many a times that we don't have to revert back to the 1970s of all the dangerous methods that were used at that point in time, and there are more access, but that doesn't mean it's always safe, and that doesn't mean that it always works, and that people are able to access the medications needed for medically induced abortions. We know that. We know that people have been denied things like Plan B at different pharmaceuticals because of their religious beliefs. The pharmacists who may or may not choose to give it to you, and that they have the right to, according to those policies. So that can also lead to desperation. And we know what happens when people are desperate. And of course, with the unsafe conditions, the increase of maternal death rates could happen. In a report conducted by University of Colorado Boulder, they stated that had there been no abortions in 2020, had it been completely banned, the maternal death rate would have risen to an increase of 14%. They had an interesting chart which showed which states would have been affected because they were able to get access to that. Obviously, this also criminalizes marginalized people more likely because they are arrested, like in Alabama, for different charges, including endangering, as they said, or murder, as they put a lot of these bills under. We know Texas has the bounties that have been happening as well. So it becomes a whole sticky situation. I know none of you are surprised, long listeners, but at the same time, we still want to keep up to date about what's happening and what we need to see. Of course, there are other good news. The ACLU and different organizations have been able to halt many of these inhumane laws. So it is also good to watch for that, because that does mean that justice systems can happen. But with the unlikelihood, but never say never, because a lot of things have happened recently, that the federal ban does go into play, that will get all swept off, and literally we're back to square one.
Yeah, and there's just so much going on. I think today, as I was checking the news, I saw all these very depressing headlines and numbers about abortion, about politicians who are calling for like jailing of women and people who are pregnant. That was just very frightening to read. But yes, there's also good news, and there are people fighting. There always have been. And so that's good to keep in mind as well. And this is obviously something that we are going to continue to talk about. And we'll keep checking in on it because it's so important. And as always, listeners, we're here with you. We're right there with you. If you have any resources you want to share from where you're located, whether that's somewhere in the U.S. or whether that's somewhere around the world, when it comes to abortion, please let us know. You can email us at stephanie@momstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter @momstuffpodcast or on Instagram @stuffI've-never-told-you. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina.
Thank you, Christina.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I've Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.